Greetings and welcome back. Hope everyone's having a great weekend or week or whatever. We're making this on a Saturday. But anyway, missing Courtney leading this, and I'll start off with that. She's not remote today, and we're giving her the day off. She has a lot of personal, responsibilities, and trying to take a little free time to, you know, get her head in the right place. So we don't want to, pressure her to be on board all the time. So anyway, we're here and in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we just had an event today at Our Lady of Guadalupe Cemetery, and really interesting event. And so I'm here with my everything. Alicia Williams, my girlfriend and historian on graveyards and gravestones and everything associated, and genealogist and TikTok sensation as well.
Yeah, I heard that Alicia is pretty famous in the social media world. Is that true? How many millions of followers do you have?
I'm very modest. I have about 2.5 million followers on TikTok
Two
right
and a
now.
half million followers.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, I assumed everybody knew who you were, and I think they do. But it's nice to have it reiterated for the people who might not know. You're famous. It's pretty cool.
It was accidental, she says, and she denies any responsibility for it. And I said, things don't happen by chance. So
How did that happen, by the way?
It was actually inspired by the 48 state tour, oddly enough, because the first year of the tour, John came to my area, the cemetery that I work in, and a couple weeks after that, I was kind of inspired by his attendance there and everything that happened. And I was like, let me set a camera up and see if I can film myself. And one day before going to work at a boring office job, the light hit this one stone just right. And I couldn't even figure out how to work this little tripod I grabbed from my kids that they'd gotten at like a Five Below or something. And then it's all crooked and catty cornered. And I just happened to capture 2 minutes of a cleaning that I was able to trim down into 60 seconds, because back then you could only post a 60-second video. And okay, I'll share it. And overnight it blew up, and I promoted Atlas. Of course, everybody was like, hey, where did you get all your supplies? And made a video about Atlas, and then, just spiraled from there.
I think I remember you were saying it was almost like a slot machine. If you want a slot machine, you kept looking at your Instagram or TikTok or whatnot, and it would just friend request, add, follow.
It was really overwhelming. I'm a super introverted person, and it was really overwhelming for me, but also really kind of exciting. I get the rush of the likes and the follows and the interaction. It was really exciting to get the attention, and but it was a little overwhelming for me too. I'm not gonna lie. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, how many people are fans of what the two of you do. It's a big world out there that are interested in this type of work.
There's definitely an increased interest, and it's kind of coming from a lot of different sides, I think. So it's I've been in this field for quite a long time. It used to be a lot more genealogists getting into it, and they start in one place, and in fact that's your background.
That's how I found it too, so
that's right.
I totally relate.
But I'm saying there was less on the social media side a while back. It wasn't as hot on
well, I think
platforms.
The thing is that people were more typically sharing still imagery. It was like, here's my before photo, here's my after photo, and I happened to present it in a different way. And then, it created a trend, and a whole lot of people started doing the same kind of videos. And then a whole lot of more people started wanting to buy supplies from Atlas, and, it just all grew. And the interest has been really neat. It's really neat to watch it grow and see how it spreads.
The flip side is there was so many imitators, you lost interest yourself in doing it. You're like, they don't need me anymore. Like there's all, it's now it's saturated. And like, so, but like when you know, in the moment you were getting interviews, you were interviewed live to like Australian TV, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild.
Yeah, it was, well, you know, the media is always looking for what's hot and popular and trending at the moment. And that's what was going on right then and there. And, you know, like John said, this tends to be like something more for genealogists, which tend to be more of an older demographic. And by presenting it to TikTok, I turned a whole younger generation into this. Oh, I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know you could go into cemeteries and do this. But I also had this kind of cool, you know, story to go along with it that was not associated with the cemeteries and gravestones, that gave kind of people a relatability to the experience of it all. So
the social media thing, you said you had a huge amount of followers in like Saudi Arabia or random places, right? And it's like, they're not coming to our events generally. I'm not seeing a lot of them there.
I understand I gained a lot of popularity in Brazil and Indonesia and a couple other, like
so
Thailand,
interesting
I
how
think.
things spread like that.
Right. Well, some places are much more revering and honoring to the dead. And, you know,
Right.
they were very receptive to it. And it was also interesting to hear from people from other cultures and areas, you know, respond to it and not knowing anything about that. Like, is this okay? Is this respectful where you're from? Would this be frowned upon? And they're like, absolutely not. This is amazing. It's so touching. It's, you know, inspiring. You know, we wish we could find a way to do this here, you know, where we are for whatever the reason.
Well, it is truly inspiring, and it is pretty cool to see the two of you show up at these events, and people know who the both of you are, and they have so many questions to ask, and you always have answers for them. It's very inspiring, and people look forward to it. I know we have a big tour ahead of us, and people are looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the people that have come up and spoken to me. There was a group at Greensboro that came up and thanked me for inspiring them to get into this field. And there was a lady in Arlington.
I know. Tell the story about the lady in Arlington.
The lady in Arlington, Texas. She had actually driven from Texas to Bedford, Virginia last year to meet me.
To the event. We were doing an event. Last year we did, I did a regional tour. So the 48 state tour started in 2020 with the intent of doing the entire country. We had, again, rain, snow out, smoke out, rain out. I never made it to the West Coast that year, but I did 41 events. And then the next year, regional tours. And then the following year, actually, Alicia and I were together and did most of the country together. She came down and met me in Louisiana, and then we did the rest of the country together. Well, last year, just to bring you up quickly to where we are now, I did 32 events. Were scheduled, actually. I held 31, I believe, but one of them was in Bedford, Virginia, and Alicia's kind of base camp there, home cemetery, if you will. And so at that event, this woman shows up. It's just an event, an average weekday, whatever day of the week it was.
She needed knee replacement surgery.
She
could
drove
hardly
from Texas to go to that event.
I believe it. I've seen and met so many people on this tour who drive from out of state, hundreds and hundreds of miles just to see this.
She drove thousands of miles.
Now that's
Yeah.
impressive.
And then when she showed, you know,
So then-
I was not in my best state of mind at that event. I had a lot going on in
Right.
life at that time. And I have thought about that woman ever since, thinking like I was so distracted that day. Like
Yeah.
I wish I had been a little bit more congenial with her. And when she showed up.
So fast forward, we're in Arlington, Texas a few days ago, and there she is again. She's like, I live in the next town over. She traveled cross country to see her, and then she's like, when I saw you were going to be a half hour away from my home or 20 minutes, she was so excited, and so she got
Yeah.
to see her
Wow.
again.
I was so grateful for the opportunity to say hello.
And she had gotten,
engage
when
with
she
her
was,
again.
she couldn't even walk in Virginia, and she had gotten knee
Yeah,
replacement
that's what
surgery.
she's like, I'm ready
and she
to
just
go.
walked up. I'm like, that's not the same person. You're like, yeah, she had surgery.
That is
It was
so incredible.
awesome. It was so awesome. Yeah.
And how beautiful and how meaningful. I feel like this type of work brings together so many types of people under one cause, and that's, to help preserve and restore these gravestones for future generations. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, politics are out of it, all of that, right? This should just be for helping preserve these sites.
Absolutely.
We touched on politics today, but just in a local interest level.
Well, we'll get to that. That was funny. Yeah, we met a local guy who was really funny.
We're no politics at these events. The whole thing is the opposite. It's inclusive. It's all about America and bringing America together, like the best values of America, so that to help each other, help community, build local community. And that's what we're all about.
It's a weird, eclectic group of people who typically take an interest in this. And
it is.
A lot of us don't have an easy time. I'm going to go ahead and say I have an easy time navigating in the world sometimes. Kind of misfits, black sheep, so to speak. And we find a sense of camaraderie in connecting with each other most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time.
Most of the time. And there's a few offshoots, but most of the time it's really great to connect and commiserate with so many people who have the same passion.
From all walks of life, all ages, and nationalities and body types, but they all have one common interest for whatever reason. So it's awesome. It's great to be. I see myself and the manifestation of the tour is I'm a conduit to bring these people together, and so that people make friends, people join friends groups, learn about how to do this. For all different reasons. Some just want to, they don't have the confidence. They want to clean their grandmother's gravestone, and they don't want to screw it up. And they've read all kinds of conflicting things because, you could read anything on the internet. And they talk about, some groups and people say you need to be certified to do this or that. And there's all kinds of confusion. And so I just try to demystify all that and just make it simple. As they say, keep it simple, stupid,
And it works. And people are loving it. Well, speaking of the tour, this last Monday on June 17th, we were in Louisiana. I still cannot pronounce the name of
Natchitoches.
Oh, you can do it.
Yes,
that's impressive.
I say Natchitoches. She does.
It's a T. It's a T, not a D. I asked.
And what interesting about this location is initially that was supposed to be Jackson Square Cemetery.
Yeah,
I believe
that was.
Maybe you could describe a little bit about that cemetery and why we moved
Absolutely.
over to the American cemetery.
I'll just interject one thing. We spent a lot of time introducing ourselves, and I want to say we're also here with Jeremy Lizelle, who is traveling with us and capturing all this on camera, and it's not an easy task, and we commend him for his time and effort. And now we're in his converted motel suite
all
to
these
a studio.
podcasts are from the hotels.
So
on the road.
it's there's probably no one that can do what he's doing, and so we greatly appreciate your time and effort and passion to be with us here. So I just wanted to put that out there to the world.
Well, that's very kind of you. I do appreciate it. And like I said, I love what the two of you are doing. I really do. The people that we're meeting, the places we're going, and it's for our country. It's really beautiful.
Every day is a new day.
And it's a new day.
You never know what you're going to get, but yeah, let's just roll it back now. You had brought it up, so we'll go back to the beginning of the week in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and we were incredibly fortunate to have Jason Church join us, and we're, old friends, and we have parallel lives in different ways, but he is a scientist, and he took us on I've been there before, but Alicia hasn't, and he took us on a private tour of the analytical equipment that he really is in charge of there, worth like millions of dollars, and it spins your mind. Like they can analyze anything, and so he runs all that stuff. But now he's so busy, he's like writing grants and supervising. But he is a scientist, but he also is a practical, common sense guy who loves to go out, help the community and fix gravestones. And so he's a very unusual person. And we want to thank Jason and also the NCPTT to, join in and, let Jason spend the time with us. And so it was an awesome event, to have him on board. But that cemetery, he I'll just back up a little. Jason reached out to me, and we collaborated before on previous events, but on the first year of the 48 state tour, I went to American Cemetery where we ended up, and we did a workshop together. And Jason and I have collaborated at other previous events in association with Preservation Trades Network, a nonprofit. And so anyway, we have a long history, and we like to work together and respect each other's knowledge. So he said, "Hey, I have this African American cemetery I've been working at, and I want to get them on the tour." And I said, "Hey, sounds great." I'm like, "Are you sure they have enough stuff for us to work on?" He's like, "Oh yeah, there's everything there. They got all kinds of problems, and it's going to be a great location." And I said, "Cool." And so we added it to the tour. And so that's how we ended up going there. And it was like an inside deal because Jason wanted to do it. And, we love to work with him. And so then we get to the cemetery. And fortunately, we went there the night before.
Yeah, we got there early enough on Sunday that, we were like, let's go check out the site for tomorrow. And it was a really good thing we did because there were some significant issues with it that would have made going forward with the workshop very difficult.
I mean, grass has got to be cut before we get there, at least, a year before. And,
right.
And I mean, this is the thing as we see this at most of these underserved areas that there's not, kind of any maintenance. And so then it makes it hard to, get in there. But it was not cared for. There was no, the grass hadn't been cut. There are giant trees there. And you got some amazing drone footage of those fallen trees. And they were massive, right?
Yeah, you asked me to get there early before we headed to the next cemetery to go ahead and film with the drone the current state of that cemetery. And looking straight down from about 1,000 feet up, all I could see were downed trees, not just overgrown grass, but huge downed trees. Yeah, so that site needs quite a bit of work.
Sunken graves, big holes everywhere, and the bugs. Oh,
yeah,
the bugs were.
So that makes it difficult for a day's presentation.
Yeah, it wasn't. It turned out not to be a good site, but Jason was just trying to help the local community, and they had promised him they would have it mowed, and so it's just one of these things. But these sites like that tend to be underserved. Communities just have these challenges that they have extremely difficult time. They don't have enough resources, and so.
But then quick thinking, Jason Church, and
we reached out to him immediately that night, and I said, this ain't going to work. And Jason is like, well, maybe they can get over there and cut it in the morning. I'm like,
that's funny.
I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'm like, is there any way we can get into American? And he hadn't collaborated with them recently due to some kind of internal, logistics. And so anyway, fortunately, he was able to reach out to them on short notice and get back to us and say, I got permission for American tomorrow. And I was like, praise the Lord, because that was not going to be a good event. And we couldn't do it in there. We would have had to cancel it because it was... And the backstory, they were saying rain early on, and I thought the whole event might get canceled. And I'll just throw that out there. It hasn't rained yet.
Nope. We haven't been rained out yet.
We haven't been rained out yet. We've been rained on a little bit, but it hasn't been rained out. Every event, completely, we've made it through the full days of
each
event.
Which is unbelievable this many days in that we haven't had. I mean, I'm saying a rain delay. Sometime you have a downpour for an hour. You might be able to run to your vehicle and come back out, and then it's soggy and kind of uncomfortable. I've had events. Obviously, I've been doing this for decades. Major rainstorms coming in the first hour or two, and then a beautiful sunny day, and like a delayed start kind of thing. So I've seen every side of it.
We've driven through quite a few rainstorms in Texas and Arkansas and Florida, but otherwise, we've gone through these big rainstorms to get to the events.
Yeah,
and
the events.
We haven't missed a beat.
After the Louisiana event, it took me quite a while to load. We had a lot of stuff out. We got it all loaded up at 4:30. We're pulling out the cemetery gate, and it starts pouring. It was timed.
Pouring.
It was like we queued it up. It was like, okay, time for the rain now. And boom, it came in, and it poured hard because when we went to visit the NCPTC, it was still pouring. And then eventually it stopped. There was big puddles, but we dodged a bullet again. So...
Yeah, it's been fantastic. And so quickly, the cemetery that we ended up at, the American Cemetery. I believe it's considered by many historians to be the oldest cemetery in the Louisiana Purchase. Is that true? Is that what Jason Church mentioned to us?
Yes.
That's what we read, and certainly Jason would be the place to go for the history because he's a local guy and he's extremely well read on the subject matter. So I think for the most part he's gonna know what's going on. We also were really fortunate to have that private interview with the gentleman next door who owns the bed and breakfast and is involved with this maintenance there and opens the gate. And he was really interesting, and he didn't really want to be on camera, but we've brought a bunch of people on camera that don't want to be on camera. So
yeah. And there was a PhD student studying under Jason Church there as well, a young woman. And she was, again, a young crowd fascinated by your work and taking notes.
Yeah, she was doing like a study on wood preservation. So it was kind of neat that she stepped outside her box to come into the cemetery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good crowd.
She had a great time. We saw her back at the offices after the workshop, and she seemed to be on cloud nine with the day. It's great.
Fantastic. Okay, so then after that, we went to Galveston, Texas on June 18th at Broadway Cemetery Historic District.
What an interesting place, but just what are your overall impressions? That was a lot. It was a lot to take in.
I mean, honestly, it's like, first it's like, how did that sink so deeply? And then it's like you realize, it was buried. It didn't sink. They literally buried it.
Because what is the elevation of that cemetery? It can't be more than 15 feet above sea level, right?
I'm not
or 20
sure
feet?
what the elevation
Not much more than Charleston Cemetery.
altogether is, but the story behind it was after the hurricane in 1900 that like basically wiped out, like 8,000 people, I'm going to say
They
it
say
was.
the worst natural disaster still to date in American history.
Wow.
They raised the level of the island like
3 times.
Three different times.
As much as 27 feet. And so as a part of that, there was multiple interventions within those historic cemeteries. And apparently, and I didn't read all the information, but I did take it in that day, and I've read a little, that if you didn't pay them what they asked, they were just going to bury your monument.
Right. You could pay to have it raised up, and they offered that every time they came in to regrade the site. But if you couldn't pay, it got buried. And the ones that were never able to pay are quite obvious. I mean, you could practically walk across the roof of some of the mausoleums.
Well,
in there.
that crazy thing is this included mausoleums. And people that built a mausoleum, when they built it, were really wealthy. But you got to think about it. Once it gets to the next generation,
But you also have to remember, those families were completely wiped out in the storms.
Many of them. That's a good point. Or financially devastated.
But I do find that some of the mausoleums, it was interesting how when they knew they were going to bury it, they did at least decide to cut the doors in half for some of them so they could still be accessed. But there was that one that's like practically completely buried underground.
Yeah, crazy history there.
Yeah.
And just a lot to take in, and bigger than expected. Like it just went on and on. Like I'm looking there was 7 cemeteries.
7 cemeteries in
but
that
they
one
all
site.
look like one to like an average, passerby. And they're actually 7 different cemeteries originally, and it's just incredible. I mean, you could raise everything up, but it would take, 1,000,000 hours and, $1 billion.
Well, they also have the added conflict of the fact that when they regraded to a certain level, they resold the burial.
This just isn't right. Because in America generally, and I say because in Europe sometimes you only get your lot for a certain amount of time.
Right.
And then you have to pay again or they remove you, which is weird, but it is what it is. But in America generally it's for perpetuity. And so like you buy a piece of land and, a grave is only, 3 by 8 or 4 by 10. It's, that little piece of land, you're assuming that's yours, and it's not going to be, after all these interventions, they said, well, these monuments are so far underground, we'll just sell the lot again.
Right. I mean, a lot of the cemeteries did get washed out during the floods too. So the storm. So maybe they were empty.
Anyway, amazing. The Kathleen had an amazing depth of knowledge there at that site, and was generous to give us the book she wrote on the site, which is really amazing. Documentation shows some photos of them, digging up some of those monuments. And you had a personal tour from her. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, it was kind of just the same thing she did for everybody, but it was just kind of neat to be able to walk around and she tell me the history of a lot of the individuals buried there. I think she does walking tours on the regular there. So it seemed like she had a lot of that stuff just stored very well in the forefront of her mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of knowledge, and she was certainly very excited to share that knowledge. Beyond flooding, they had quite a bit of fire ants. And I know John and I got eaten up pretty well over the last week or so. We have welts all over our legs.
Most of them better, but yeah, it was weird because when I was seeing them early on, I wasn't having any issues, and then later, it seemed like when you weren't seeing them, then it was. I don't know. I don't know what was biting me, honestly.
Because they're sneaky. They'll crawl up your pants, under your pants to find your flesh and bite you and sting you.
Well,
this job isn't easy, but we're up for it.
There you go. So.
It's nice to have some war wounds to show.
That's right.
When I get back home to California. Yeah.
But that site was incredibly interesting, but also just really kind of frustrating in a certain sense, because it's hard to really have an impact at something so big that's so complicated, and lack of local involvement there. And we see this all too often for a city that, big with that much history there, many of the founders of the city, just not that many folks, in attendance. And the other thing is they were talking a storm was coming, and they're really low water table there, and we dodged a bullet there also, right? So
certainly. Oof, it was hot and humid, but we dodged a bullet. Mm-hmm. No big storms.
Definitely not gaining any weight on this tour. So, that's it's a high heat, stress, sweat index for us.
I think you need to start another YouTube channel of your aerobics routine, keeping people in shape without having to actually go to the gym.
Right.
You go out and repair gravestones.
That's right.
You stay fit. You don't need the gym.
That's right. Just stay away from fried food and everything's fine.
And then from there, we were in Arlington, Texas. It was June 19th, and Johnson Station Cemetery, and there was a huge crowd. That might have been the biggest crowd so far.
Absolutely. What a epic reversal from the day before in Galveston. Great folks, but just kind of low energy and just not the biggest group. And then show up in Arlington, and wow, it was like
they had a crowd waiting for us.
No,
it was amazing.
It was like they called out the troops for that one. So
they had so much materials. They had tons of materials.
They
there
were
for
on
us
the
ready.
job, and so that's we got to give. We should give in the end we should give awards out for the most prepared. They were on the job, and the elderly lady, what was her name?
Christina, I believe was her name.
I mean, she was incredible.
From the DAR.
And so she is the one, I think, who galvanized the whole thing. I think she reached out to us, filled out the form, and had her DAR group on board. And the DAR, they're really great people and actively involved in the history in many situations. But she went over the top, because a lot of time the DAR, and I've been to many events they've helped get going, but they don't bring out they don't bring out all the troops. They're mostly elderly ladies, and they really care and have a passion, but they got the city involved. And so then the city, brought, they had council people there. They had a guy actually that worked for the city there on the job, helping out.
I got cards from at least 3 city council members and the mayor.
Whenever the city gets on board, whenever the city really gets on board, and I've had this, happen a few dozen times over the last, few years, it's always a good event. Like if the city's on board and they're enthusiastic, because then it radiates, it's good energy. We had one in Wilkes-Barre or Wilkes-Barre, however they pronounce it, in Pennsylvania last year, and the mayor was there at the beginning. I mean, the mayor literally of the, you know, so I mean, they cared and they were really warm and just so appreciative. And so this was the same vibe in Arlington. It was just the whole city was really excited to have us there, appreciative, and then it just generates that positive energy back. And it's like, you know, it made it so, you know, wonderful and enjoyable, and everyone had a great day.
And some really nice repairs you did as well. Really, really nice.
Got really hot and humid, and wow, the evaporative cooling is great when you're absolutely drenched with sweat, because then any air movement cools you, you know.
Well, they say that was the coolest day they were going to have there that week, so we kind of lucked out in a way.
So the biggest thing that, you know, that the amount of participation there, and when we had 4 or 5, you know, ladies jump in, and then I mean other, you know, guys were helping too, but especially that group of women who were really dedicated, enthusiastic, and chiseling away this really nasty, hard Portland cement mortar that was used from a previous repair, so we could, you know, reset this monument and, you know, get it in good condition. And, you know, it was an excellent group effort.
It was.
And really, you know, empowering to have that kind of community involvement. And, you know, that's what I like to say, you know, if you watch somebody, you can learn. If you help, you know, you absorb some of it. But if you get in there and do it and get your hands dirty, like, then you can do it again. Like, you did it once. And that's the whole point of the tour, is to give people enough confidence to get in there and get dirty. And it's hard in a one-day event, but, you know, but they did it there, right?
They did great.
The event was flowing incredibly well, and, you know, starting with this huge group of people that were so warm and enthusiastic, and, you know, then we did the tour of the site, and it was a great site to work at because there were so many fallen monuments, but they were all almost, you know, repairable, a lot of big shade trees, and so we had a great tour. And then we got into the cleaning and a lot of involvement, and everyone was really, you know, get energized by the fact they could actually help and, you know, really make improvements right away by, you know, helping, you know, clean these gravestones. Then we got into doing a repair, and it went well because we don't always have time in the morning. It depends on the flow of the event. But we did a fractured tablet repair, which is one of the most common types of repairs. And we were just doing some infill at the end of the repair along a little brake line. And all of a sudden, someone appeared who had some questions. So,
Did he have questions? I mean, I can't really speak on that because I was, you know, indisposed at that moment, and that's probably lucky for him that I was. But I just know that he was not asking questions. What I was reported to me was that he was being confrontational and argumentative about your methods and materials. So
yeah. And just the backstory on that is, he had attended an event I did on the 48 state tour in 21, and I taught him a lot that day. We had a great day together, and we did a lot of tripod lifting. I remember that. And then in 22, excuse me, he was at the event we were at in, I'm not going to even say it,
Waxahachie.
Thank you. And so anyway, I thought he was friends, you know, friendly, and I mean, I don't have any animosity toward anyone, and so all of a sudden he appears, and he had a binder full of paperwork, and he was there to try to question some techniques, I guess, but it was an odd.
He had photos that he claimed were of work that you had done in Waxahachie in 22, but upon further investigation, it was not actually anything that you had worked on in Waxahachie. So that was what he had, some photos of work that was, in his opinion, subpar, and he was trying to present it as a means of discrediting your methodology.
Kind of like a gotcha situation.
Yes, kind of like a gotcha.
Exactly.
And then I said, wait a second, that's a veteran stone. And John does not typically repair them because the VA will replace them if you jump through the right hoops. And I'm like,
free of charge.
Yeah. And it's like, that's kind of odd. And it, you know, just even a quick glance, I was like, kind of messy, maybe a beginner. But then when I went back and looked at photos, it was definitely not one he had worked on. So I'm not sure what his ultimate goal was there, except to cause a scene.
Yeah. He unfortunately interrupted your presentation in front of 80 people on cleaning the stones. And I was thinking to myself, come on, man, just wait till afterwards, then have a nice dialogue back and forth, and the two of you will come to some conclusion and be friends in the future. But it was like he wants to interrupt everything and make it about him, and that was just unfortunate.
It was premeditated. Right. So that if he wanted to have a conversation, that it wouldn't have been an issue at all. And he could have even asked questions publicly if they were questions like, do you have, issues with this, or, what could be the downfall or the shortcomings of this treatment. But I'll also say, just to back up a little, that I am always clear to say at every event, and I'm sure I usually say it many times, that I provide hands-on, practical solutions to common problems, and I try to do it with the fewest tools possible, but using the best products for strong long endurance and performance in the field, so that there's not one answer to a lot of questions. And anyone who has worked with me for any length of time, that I try to go through many different scenarios and use different products and different techniques, because that ultimately in the field, when you go to actually doing work, you encounter all kinds of strange, unusual circumstances. Things have been previously fixed. They were made in ways that were not well designed, possibly. And so ultimately you have to come up with solutions to problems. And so I don't say there's one way to do anything. And I'm always very careful to say that, some folks have different techniques and ideas, and it's working well for them, and great. That I just offer what's worked for me, that I've gone through this for decades and I've spent 30,000-40,000 years working on monuments. And so I've full time for almost 25 years just on the restoration. And so I just teach the things that work, and I share information freely. And so people do with it what they will, and there's no one answer to every problem. And the more you get into something, the more you realize that there's many different solutions to one problem. There's different philosophies. There's different regions in the country that have different weathering and different, localized issues. And so, some places have huge graffiti problems, and some it's unknown. So that, that's a problem that could be huge in one area, just as an example. But anyway, it was a very interesting altercation. Fortunately, he backed off quickly.
I think he was ultimately asked to leave. I'm not entirely sure on that.
Well, now I know that Alicia's other newest title is she's head of security now, also, because she is not shy about getting in front of a heckler. So, so another hat to wear.
We've certainly learned that. And I'd just like to say, it's not like you would want to alienate anybody. I know that about you. I know you pretty well now. I'm certain you would want to have a dialogue with this guy in the future, in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why also, just to say that I'm collaborating with Jason Church and Moss Rudley and people that also have high levels of professional training and a lot of integrity. And they wouldn't want to work with me and collaborate if they didn't respect me and, respect the work that I do. And so I'm very, careful always to say that there's not one solution to all problems. It depends on the setting. It depends on, the region, the funding even possibly could factor in. So, but anyway, it was an interesting day. And ultimately, I think the whole thing, if he was intending to cause harm in some way, it backfired, because it seemed to create more positive energy as kind of like the offshoot of it,
I agree with that.
It backfired.
People almost became protective of you in the situation, because it was very rude what he did and how he approached it. And he persisted even after you were disregarding him and not engaging. He was still persisting with people behind the camera.
It was odd. Yeah. And I will say that he was the most brave to kind of, jump out there. But there's a lot of people that have different ideas, and, but my whole thing is that everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And the thing is, in America, there's not one governance over this, and there is no one way to do things. And the interesting thing, and this is where you're really one of the top historians on this, reading the historical information, is there was never one way they did things.
No, never.
I mean, the more things you read, the more different ways they did it. And there was discussions about, hey, are you doing this way? We're talking in 1919 or 1890. And they're not like, there's not one way anything was ever done. Right. And so to come out now and say that you're doing something wrong, it's kind of like, it's very short-sighted. Also,
the historical methods were not good. They were not safe. They would be hazardous to your health.
Absolutely. And well, this is a related subject matter we don't have time to delve into, but it's a great thing to touch on, is that a lot of people today they're working on monuments, and this is coming from the field of more building restoration, but it's kind of...
well, this was his argument also, that you're not using historically accurate
so
methods
there's a desire,
and materials and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's a desire in doing, preservation work, conservation, to try to use, as much of the original materials as possible if you're redoing something. The problem is a lot of the original materials they were using, especially to join monuments, were like lead and, like powdered lead and all kinds of,
all kinds of stuff.
Historic glues and things you can't even get anymore, or like, cleaning solutions from ox
gall and gasoline.
Yeah, and you could get that ox gall at any local butcher back in, whatever day. And in your dry goods shop, you could get, whatever you wanted, mercury,
right.
Arsenic, I mean, they were all good tools back then. So, anyway, we can kind of jump off of that, but it's just that the historically accurate materials they were using are not always desirable today. That's all I want to say in a nutshell. Like that, we have to be sensitive to the fact that we've evolved past a lot of these practices, and there's also technological advances that we don't want to like jump on and grab before they're true and proven and tested. But at the same time, people are not still riding horses around for transportation. They're driving cars or flying airplanes, because horses are great. They'll get you there, but they're really slow.
Right.
So I mean, the thing is, eventually you have to go with the times here. I mean, the Amish, they do good with the horses. So I mean, good for them. There's exceptions.
Yeah, that was a really interesting event, and we certainly learned a lot. Next up, we were in Park Hill, Oklahoma, at Ross Cemetery, and the one thing that stood out to me in this particular location is just how beautiful that part of Oklahoma is. That setting was gorgeous.
Yeah, Oklahoma's can be pretty in areas for sure.
And it had a lot of history there, some unfortunate history. I remember
the Trail of Tears was right through Oklahoma.
It ended there in Park Hill. Yeah.
And the whole Native American, and obviously that ranges way outside Oklahoma, but Oklahoma is interesting today still. There's such a strong Native American presence driving through different tribal lands, even on the main highways. And there's this interesting intermix between, tribal, lands and also the state. And so it's complicated. And, but yeah, it was a beautiful spot for sure. And
we just had to find the right one to go to first.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I got there before you, well before you.
Yes,
and then I got
did.
a text from John. We're at the wrong cemetery.
Yeah.
And John and Alicia, for all of you out there, are always super early.
Oh, that's because of me. That's all.
Yeah, and I respect that. And they do that to do a location scout beforehand and learn the site a bit more, so the day can unfold just as they want it to. But they weren't there. And I got a text. We're at the other cemetery where you happened to be at, I think, years prior.
I had never done. I had done events in Tahlequah, but never at that Ross Cemetery. But the
Right.
point is that I was lazy, and I just put it in navigation, and I punched up Ross Cemetery, and it said it was like 7 minutes away, and I'm like, that's the place.
It's like what I did today with this cemetery. And I showed up.
Exactly right.
Yeah, there's
And I didn't check my own tour schedule, and I did. So I mean, it's still easier if it's already in navigation. But what I need to do is then look for the address and double check and make sure it's the same address, and then I'm good. And I didn't, and so we went there, and there was no one there, and anyway.
They were worried. They were like, "Is John coming?" And I guarantee you, he will be here. They were eagerly anticipating your arrival.
We were fortunate that we had you there, and so they knew that it wasn't like if no one was there, we could have just like no-showed. And I've never done a no-show, and I've been late only a few times. The worst time on the original 48 state tour, I was about 3 hours late going to the Newark, Delaware event because the highway was closed.
Oh, well, that was
And so,
not your fault.
So we made it up this year because we went back there. And had a great event. But anyway, so it was a good event. The only thing I will say, and just be like completely honest, that sometimes people that have expectations that we're not able to satisfy because they're unrealistic. And so that the idea of the 48 state tour is to, provide practical solutions to common problems. And so we try to do as many different types of treatments as we can. And some folks to that event traveled, 3, 4, 5 hours also. And we're not sure why they came, but they want to learn how to clean stones or do a tablet repair. And so there was a large monument that was historically significant, and they were hoping that I would just jump in and work on it.
Yeah, he was the former treasurer of the Cherokee tribe.
It was a great monument. It was beautiful marble, and it was, but the other thing is it was about 93 degrees that day in the bright sun.
super hot and humid.
And there wasn't a lot of, as I say, hands on deck, like there was a bunch of people there, but they weren't all going to be the kind of people who were like shoveling. That's all I could say.
Yeah, and that was a pretty big monument. And one of the guests in attendance there, they came out and just said, "Well, just can't you take your tripod and just set up your tripod and then you can fix it?"
I don't think you had enough lift.
Well, there's
on
a
your
limit.
tripod.
That monument was
It was
above the limit.
It was much bigger than it looked. Also, it was sitting sunk in the ground a little.
Sometimes it's not that easy.
No. Well, there's height restrictions. I mean,
Yeah.
I could do anything, but,
You need the time. Yeah.
not at a 48 state tour event,
Right.
because the point of the event is not to fix one monument and like work incredibly hard in the sun and have a whole bunch of people watch me that are going to be kind of disenfranchised. I mean, some might like it. The tour is to bring people together to learn and talk and share and learn a wide range of knowledge and hopefully ask questions and interact and participate. And so that's kind of was a shortcoming. We've had this before at other events, and so I'm trying to get that out there. That's why I'm just, kind of hitting the nail directly on the head to say that, we're happy to do anything reasonable, but that ultimately the decisions have to be made once we're there and we walk the site, and that even looking at it and talking about it and me giving my impressions and visual assessment of what the situation is valuable information, because I've been doing this a long time, so I can look at it and see, what's involved, what it's going to take. And, sometimes there's hidden things underground, like there's damage we can't see. So that's obviously unknown, but based on what I can see, I can provide a lot of information quickly. And so that's a more valuable thing that people should be, understanding, that, we're assessing the site, and then they have a better understanding. And then later we saw a bunch of smaller monuments that were not that complicated, but they were really, really unstable and about to fall over any minute. And so to me, those are priorities, not the big one that's already on the ground, from one famous person. That's something you plan and do in a calculated way. You don't rush and do it at an event.
And you certainly took care of those other gravestones and monuments, and taught those people a lot that day in the hot and humid weather. And we learned a lot about the Cherokee Nation and the Trail of Tears, historically significant. And for anybody who wants to learn more, I highly recommend looking up the Ross Cemetery and doing some research.
Absolutely. And I will say also, but thanks, for to the hosts for reaching out to us, and because we love to include all the different diversity of America, and so to have the Native American connection in Oklahoma was fantastic, and so it was an invaluable part of the tour to be included, and so we were happy to to be there and learn about the history there as well.
Yeah, beautiful, fantastic day. And then today, where we are right now, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Yeah, I should know because that's what I typed into Google Maps this morning. And I went to the first one that popped up, which was 3 miles away. I waited. Nobody was there. I texted John. I didn't get an answer back right away. So I put it in Our Lady of Guadalupe Cemetery again. I got another one 29 miles away. So I started up going north to that one when I did get your text, and you sent me the right address in the middle of Santa Fe. So I turned around and booked it, and I was 10 minutes late to work.
Oh, you were great.
Yeah, I mean, first time, but
there was no issue. There was, and luckily you didn't go to the shrine because there's also Our Lady of Guadalupe shrine.
There's so many Our Ladies of Guadalupe.
I know,
out here.
and I wasn't aware of that either until I started searching it. So yeah, there's a lot of Guadalupes around here.
Again, interesting site, and dive into it. It was different.
Yeah, I mean, so the backstory on this is, like, Atlas has grown a lot of reach on the 48 state tour, Atlas preservation, through our direct email, and then also through, Facebook and social media and all the people that share information like Alicia, that, share it out into other platforms. And so, a lot of people know about the tour, but as we get further west, there's lower populations and, there's not as much interest in historic preservation in the general public, and there's just not as much old built heritage here, accepting Native American sites. And generally in the earlier years, Native Americans didn't really use monuments like we do. So the bottom line is there's just less depth and less interest, and so we have less following. So we didn't really have people reaching out in a few states and saying, hey, we want you to do an event here. And so we did have one location that would have been interested to have us return in Albuquerque, which was a really good site. But, we wanted to go to, a new area, and also to represent more different, kind of walks of life. And so I started searching Taos and Santa Fe and was able to eventually get in touch with, I was referred to the fact that Our Lady of Guadalupe was a poor, very poor, Spanish Catholic historic cemetery that was kind of endangered, and some folks here were trying to help out and do what they could. And ultimately that led me to requesting permission from the Diocese of Santa Fe, and they immediately referred me back to the local parish, which is Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. And so I eventually connected, by calling them many times. I eventually got through and ultimately was granted permission to hold the event there. Unfortunately, they said they would also help, tell their congregation about it and, come visit us at the site and, bring some water to use and stuff like that. But, they must have been busy. So, none of those dots connected, but,
yeah, some communication, I think, fell through the cracks out here in Santa Fe. I mean, you did your due diligence, and we showed up. There were 2 people there, but 2 very enthusiastic locals who had a deep connection to that cemetery. So we got to meet them and have a nice walk and talk and learn more. And then you dove into monument repair.
Yeah, I thought the older gentleman we met there was amazing, actually. And the fact that he had been trying to get in there and he couldn't get into the gate because the combination lock had changed. And so he had, and his grandfather's buried there, and he personally rebuilt his monument, and his father had made the original monument. And so the history there to me was amazing. And he was a talker, and he loved to talk. And so we got a lot of content from him, and a really charismatic 80-year-old gentleman who was born and raised there, and really conveyed the thing that we kept hearing echoed by all of the locals, and they're kind of saying it in this kind of, it's I'm not sure how you say it, but they're like Santa Fe has.
It sure has changed.
They just kept saying it.
I think.
It's kind of
I
like
think
sad.
that's the sentiment of most people who are local to an area for most of their life. Boy, it sure has changed. I say the same thing about my hometown too.
But especially an area like Santa Fe that's now like touristy, and
Right.
it's like it used. I'm sure when he was a kid, it was more local, and
Right.
it was more just a community, right? And
Yeah, it has to be kind of sad for these individuals to see this historic cemetery in the middle of the city, surrounded by a McDonald's or a Dunkin' Donuts
Yes.
or a mall or parking lots, and it's like, well, it's probably not what their ancestors had in mind when they were buried.
I mean, I hear you, but I think that's not really the issue, because that's the way urban expansion has been. But everything could coexist, but it's not cared for. And so there lies the rub. And so it's fenced off with a chain link fence. So, no honest person can go in unless they have entry to the gate, which it basically scares away almost everybody. And so then only, an unseemly element can go in. And that's the way all chain link fences are. So I am a big opponent to chain link fences in cemeteries. And I've been talking about this for decades. And I worked around cemeteries like this in Hartford back 25 years ago, and I'll tell you right now, those fences don't work, and they're not a good thing, and they send a bad signal out there. I get it, bad neighborhoods, and you're trying to protect it, but what I'm saying is these places like that, no one is there to. You could cut a chain link fence down in 5 minutes if you want to, and also most of them are like so low you could just jump over them. Trees knock them down, and so then they're not really secure sites. So then I always like to say, are you keeping people in or out? Like, what are you doing here? And so I don't know. That's the way I look at it. And but anyway, us being there attracted a lot of positive attention. And so I put up a couple pop-up tents, bright colors, because the rain was kind of spattering on us. And we had the gate open. Of course, the tour vehicle there.
That's unmissable.
Jeremy said, "Hey, are you going to wrap this thing?" And I said, "I don't even know."
I'm so glad you wrapped your vehicle with
ultimately,
your logo.
It was huge, and so that it makes it really official. It draws attention to it, and also, like, even if the cops are driving by, they're like, okay, like,
well, they did.
They did
drive by
at the end, but that's because the other guy called because he thought the homeless guy there might be dead, or he was sick or something. And so
he hadn't moved in a while, so I called.
This was one of the earlier two gentlemen, because he came back at the very end and we saw him again.
Right.
And he said he came back with WD-40 and lubricated the lock and fixed the lock so it would work now. So, some people do care, but we saw people come in that didn't know we were there. They're just like, wow, the gate's open. There's, this vehicle there, and we're in there doing something. And a bunch of people came in throughout the day and said, what's going on there? And
very curious people. And once they saw what you were doing and who you are and what you're about, they were very supportive.
Absolutely. And so I see like always opportunity. I mean, it was a very sad sight, and Alicia was really affected from the children that, passed away so young.
It was the whole place. It was the whole
and
place.
The whole energy of the place. But I always try to see the positive side of the memory of those that we can still help save through the stones that are there. And you pointed out all of those markers, they're like temporary funeral home markers. But then once the glass,
the paper is gone from this,
the paper under the glass or however they were made, wore away, and there's probably no other record.
Well, there were a couple of them that somebody had come back and scratched the name back into the metal where the paper was no longer there. So there's so many handmade markers for little children, so much love and tenderness put into creating them.
Yes.
That I couldn't help but be emotional seeing them crumble.
Right. No,
it's really nice to see how, and you've been to so many cemeteries, Alicia, around the U.S., and just to see how it still affects you. I didn't know much about this world until I signed on to do this project, and I was kind of concerned about how I would feel being in a cemetery. It's not a place I ever visited often. And at the first cemetery that we went to, I believe it was in Connecticut, it took me aback. It took me a while to kind of comprehend it and absorb those emotions and understand that what we're doing is helping. It's for the good of these cemeteries. And that hasn't been lost on me since. It's 2021 events now. And to see you so many years in doing this and watching you out there in the field today, in the cemetery, still being affected by what you're seeing and reading, and you were emotional, you were crying, and I stood back, put the camera down, I let you have your moment because it does affect you, and that's honestly, that's really beautiful to see.
It does. I found my way into the cemetery in a really dark place in my life, and I poured a lot of emotion into the work for myself, and it's turned my life around. So I feel like the emotion runs deep through me in every site because, a dark place led me here and led me to see all of this stuff. And it's like, something good comes out of all of it. And so I like to think that something good will come out of our appearance here today, even though we didn't have anybody really show up for the workshop itself, that, we left behind a little bit of a positive impact on the area and the memories of those people there today.
Well, we captured it on film as well, and so and then it was a uneven. Then a lady came who was not happy we were there because she didn't think we had permission, and she was kind of aggressive, and it wasn't good energy. But ultimately, then she called her associates, and then the gentleman that came later was a super nice guy who was he called himself a community activist, and then he came back and he hung out, and he was showing me how he personally had spearheaded the drive to restore this historic locomotive in the community right nearby that's on display, and he was so appreciative we were there. And so that sometimes people, their emotions get the best of them, and they're not able to understand that we're here to do good, and that we're not threatening them, and so it's an interesting topic, but
I think it worked itself out just fine. I mean, hats off to her for kind of being protective of the area, but it took some time for this one individual to see what you were doing and then to be supportive, but she did come around. She came full circle,
right?
And what a great group of people that ended up being there in the end.
Yeah, it was excellent. And I'll just interject one more thing. The overlying thing, which is kind of this reoccurring thing, and this is kind of actually one of the biggest themes of this whole tour that's not really been discussed, is that technically, the monuments are the family's responsibility. But in many situations, and I would say actually most, or the vast majority of circumstances in historic cemeteries, the family is not involved anymore. They either don't exist, they don't know about the monument, they don't have the resources, no one is getting in touch with them. So then I'm just going to more pose the question out there, does it not become, the community's responsibility to care for their collective history? So is it no longer the family's responsibility? And I will say that many, many places I've collaborated with have, reversed the whole scenario and brought the community in, and then even, kind of helped restore and then convert these historic sites into like combination cemetery parks. And that could have, adaptive reuse for, people to still visit and see the graves, but then also, use some of these open spaces in some situations as, places to walk your dog, or, make a painting or whatever,
But the community involvement is so key. And I think this week, that's the biggest lesson we've learned, especially.
Absolutely.
The shining example this week was by far Arlington, and the support that they gave, not only us being there, but, the residents of that cemetery, and improving the site. And it truly is an example that many places should look to
And
follow.
I kind of just pinpoint that and finish that topic by saying that one person can always make a difference, because that lady who invited us there, and got the ball rolling in Arlington, then created this whole wave of energy. And so, and also she was not out there shoveling, she was elderly. So that's what also to remember that, like it's not the person out there. They don't have to be the one sweating and raising the stones, but if you galvanize community interest, that's way more powerful than you go fixing a couple stones.
There's a job for everybody.
That's right.
When it comes to preserving cemeteries. There's a job for everybody. You don't have to be getting your hands dirty at all.
We just got to get more youngsters involved.
That's right.
That's the challenge. So if we can tap into the, vocational schools and colleges and, and even, Eagle Scouts and high schools and get the kids on board earlier, that could be a game changer.
Yep, I agree.
Well, certainly. All right. And quickly for next week, we will be in Superior, Arizona on June 24th. That's Monday at Fairview Cemetery. And then June 26th in Altadena, California. That's right up the street from my home in Sherman Oaks, California. And that'll be in Mountain View Cemetery. And then June 29th in Nevada City, beautiful Nevada City. I can't wait. And that'll be on Saturday, again, the 29th at Nevada Cemetery District. And then
that's the whole week.
Then there's Monday. I'll just mention it too. That'll be the 1st of July in Canby, Oregon.
Yeah.
And that'll be in Rock Creek Cemetery. And we really hope people can come out to that one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All of them.
Yes.
Absolutely. Working our way to the West Coast. So we're going to be really excited to be there. And now the distances open up. And so that's why we have less events and more travel days in the middle. And also an extra day, maybe on the West Coast. So I was actually thinking, Jeremy needs a little time to be at his home base there. But anyway, we all need a little time, so it's a good place to be there in California, and but yeah, it's going to be an awesome week ahead. A lot more land, a lot more beautiful, scenery of America, and I mean, I love the deserts and the open areas, and I don't want to be out there on a horse, or out there in 100-degree heat, but I mean, I love to be out there and see the sights and take it all in. And, hopefully we could, get out on foot a little bit somewhere with some scenic, vistas. And
hey, Pacific Northwest, we'll be there soon.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, epic coastlines, mountains, volcanoes.
Maybe a little cooler too. I mean, we had a cooler day today than expected, and we, I think we, I'm not going to say it. I mean, we still got Nevada, and but we made it through most of the heat, most of the high heat, because the South. I planned this whole thing, it wasn't easy to do. And I was trying to work my way through the South as quick as we possibly could as the heat was building. That was my thinking the whole time. But I knew it was like a balancing act, and there was a lot of, obviously, luck involved. So, we could have had a heat wave, and, and we had some hot days, but, amazingly good weather overall, because the rain has held out, and also the planning was not coincidental. I was picking places with big shade trees as much as possible, so that was definitely a factor, because I've learned from my mistakes. So
well, we thank the shade trees.
We love the shade trees.
We love the shade trees. We welcome them.
So yeah, it's going to be an exciting week coming up ahead, and really excited to make our way to the West Coast and then work our way up the coast. And then, it's going to be a bunch of long distance and travel days in the middle. And then we're going to get to the Midwest, and it tightens up, and it's going to be a lot of events in sequence again. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Fantastic. Rock and roll. All right. We'll see you all out there.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening. Cheers.